Venus in the Signs Intro. Today we're starting a series on Venus in the Signs. Venus is usually described as love, attraction, beauty, and money. That's correct, but incomplete. In a chart, Venus shows how you relate to what you want. It describes your instinct for connection, your taste, your way of giving and receiving, and the kind of experiences that feel worth having. It also shows how you handle pleasure, how you attach value to people and things, and how easily you allow yourself to enjoy what is already available. This is why Venus is not only about relationships. It's about preference. It's about selection. It's about what you move toward and what you quietly reject. Two people can want love, but mean completely different things by it. One may need directness and movement, another needs stability and time. One is drawn to stimulation, another to calm. That difference is not random. Venus explains it. The sign Venus is in shows how that instinct operates. It changes the pace, the tone, and the expectations. Some Venus placements move quickly and lose interest just as fast if there is no response. Others take their time and only open when something proves itself. Some respond to words, others to consistency, others to presence, others to intensity. The same applies to money and value. Venus describes what you consider worth investing in, what you naturally attract, and where you may either overextend or hold back. It often shows where things come easily and where they become complicated because your sense of value is not aligned with reality yet. In the natal chart, the sign gives the style, the house shows the area of life, and the aspects modify how smoothly or intensely Venus operates. So this series focuses on the sign first. We're going to look at how Venus behaves in each sign, how it approaches attraction, what it responds to, what it avoids, and where it tends to create both ease and problems if it's not understood properly. No cliches, no simplified labels, just how the placement actually works. Venus in Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius does not follow a standard pattern in relationships. This is a Saturn and Uranus-ruled Venus, so attraction is tied to both structure and disruption at the same time. It wants connection, but it also wants independence. It wants closeness, but not at the cost of individuality. That combination makes this one of the most unusual Venus placements, because it does not respond to relationships the way people expect. Now, this is not a cold placement. That's a common misunderstanding. Venus in Aquarius cares, but it expresses that care differently. Less through emotional intensity, more through understanding, presence, and mental connection. It wants to connect mind to mind first. If that is not there, the rest does not hold. Now, attraction here often begins with difference. Something about the other person stands out, not in a dramatic way, in a distinct way. They think differently. They see things differently. They don't follow the usual pattern. That creates interest. This is not a placement that is drawn to what is predictable. It wants something that feels original. Now, one of the strengths of Venus in Aquarius is perspective. It can step back and see the bigger picture. It does not get lost in emotion easily. It can understand dynamics without becoming overwhelmed by them. That makes it good at handling complexity. But the shadow is detachment, stepping back too much, staying in observation instead of participation, and that can create distance. Now, let's talk about how this placement connects. It often starts as friendship, conversation, shared ideas, mutual understanding. There is usually a need for a mental bond before anything else develops. This is not a placement that leads with emotion. It leads with awareness. Now, how does Venus in Aquarius show affection? Often through presence and acceptance, allowing the other person to be themselves, not trying to change them, giving space. There can also be a steady quality, not overly emotional, but consistent. I'm here, I understand you. I'm not trying to control you. That's the tone. Now, the humor of this placement is subtle but sharp, because Venus in Aquarius can see patterns quickly. It can notice inconsistencies, and it can point them out in a way that is both accurate and slightly unexpected. There is often a dry or observational humor, not emotional, more intellectual. Now, one of the main challenges here is emotional distance. Not because this placement cannot feel, because it does not always express feeling in a way others recognize. It may care deeply and still appear calm, neutral, or detached, which can create confusion. Now, in relationships, Venus in Aquarius needs freedom. But again, not distance. Freedom, the ability to think independently, to maintain individuality, to not be absorbed into the other person completely. If that is respected, the connection strengthens. If not, it pulls away. Now, in long-term relationships, this placement thrives on mutual respect, not just emotional connection. Respect, understanding each other's individuality, allowing space without interpreting it as rejection. This is where many misunderstandings happen, because this placement can need space and still be fully connected. But if the other person interprets that space as distance, tension builds. Now, let's talk about attraction patterns. This placement can sometimes be drawn to what is unconventional, not fully defined relationships, unusual dynamics, situations that don't follow a clear structure, because there is freedom there. But that can also create instability if not grounded. So part of the development is choosing when to bring structure into the connection. Not everything has to remain open-ended. Now, let's bring this into money and value. Venus in Aquarius often values innovation, ideas, future potential, something different. There can be interest in new systems, technology, or unconventional ways of earning. The strength is originality. The shadow is inconsistency, not always following through, changing direction too quickly. So again, balance. Now, in terms of self-worth, this placement is tied to individuality, feeling unique, feeling independent, feeling mentally aligned with oneself. If that is present, confidence is strong. If not, it can feel disconnected. So for Venus in Aquarius, self-worth grows through authenticity, not conformity. Now, one of the best qualities of this placement is that it allows relationships to breathe. It does not suffocate. It does not control. It does not force. It creates space. And in that space, something real can develop. But when it is not conscious, it can become too distant, too detached, too focused on independence. So the key for Venus in Aquarius is not to become more emotional in a forced way. It is to become more present within connection, to keep the freedom but stay engaged, to keep the individuality but allow closeness, to keep the perspective but participate. Because when that happens, this placement becomes one of the most progressive in the chart. It does not just connect. It evolves connection. And it does it in a way that allows both people to remain fully themselves. Venus in Aquarius does not move through relationships in a predictable way. It is not drawn to connection simply because it is there. Something has to stand out, not in an obvious or dramatic sense, but in a way that feels different from what it already knows. A different way of thinking, a different perspective, a different kind of presence. That difference is what creates interest, because this placement is not looking for familiarity. It is looking for something that expands its understanding. Attraction often begins through conversation. Not small talk, but something that has substance, ideas, observations, a sense that the other person sees the world in a way that is worth exploring. If that is missing, the connection rarely deepens, no matter how appealing everything else might be. And when it is there, it can create a bond that feels immediate, but not in an emotional way. More like recognition, a sense that something clicks mentally before anything else forms. That is usually the starting point. Now, one of the defining traits of Venus in Aquarius is that it needs space inside connection, not distance. Space, the ability to think freely, to move without pressure, to remain an individual, even when involved with someone else. If that space is respected, the connection tends to grow. If it is restricted, something begins to shut down, not suddenly, but steadily, because this placement does not respond well to being absorbed or defined by the relationship. It wants to be with someone, not become someone else. That distinction matters. Another thing that becomes clear over time is that Venus in Aquarius does not experience closeness through intensity alone. It is not trying to merge. It is trying to connect without losing clarity. So while it can feel deeply, it usually stays aware at the same time. It does not disappear into the experience. It observes it while participating in it. That can make it seem composed, even when something meaningful is happening. And that is where confusion often begins, because the feeling is there, but it does not always look the way people expect. This placement may not react strongly in the moment. It may not express everything immediately. It may take time to fully understand what it feels. But that does not mean the connection is shallow. It often means the connection is being processed in a different way. Now, something important to understand is that Venus in Aquarius values honesty, but not in an emotional, reactive sense. It values clarity, directness, transparency, saying what is real without unnecessary complication. It does not enjoy guessing games. It does not enjoy emotional ambiguity that could be resolved with a simple conversation. And when communication is clear, the relationship becomes much easier for this placement to stay in, because it does not have to constantly interpret what is happening. It can just engage with it. There is also a strong sensitivity to pressure, not obvious pressure, subtle pressure, expectation, assumption, the feeling that there is a correct way to respond. When that starts to build, Venus in Aquarius often pulls back, because it does not want to perform connection. It wants to choose it. That is a key point. This placement needs to feel that it is there voluntarily at all times, not because it is required, not because it is expected, because it wants to be. That sense of choice is what keeps it engaged. Now, one of the strengths of Venus in Aquarius is perspective. It can step outside of a situation and see it clearly. It understands patterns. It recognizes when something is repeating, when something is no longer working, when a dynamic is becoming unbalanced. That awareness can be extremely useful. It prevents unnecessary escalation. It keeps things from becoming overly reactive, but it can also create distance if it becomes the default position, because understanding something is not the same as being fully present in it. At some point, participation matters, and that is one of the main developments for this placement, learning when to step in, not just step back. Another important layer is that Venus in Aquarius often values respect more than emotional intensity. Respect for individuality, respect for boundaries, respect for differences. If that respect is there, the connection can remain strong even through changes. If it is not, interest fades regardless of how strong the attraction may have been. Because without respect, the relationship starts to feel limiting. And limitation is something this placement avoids. There is also a natural openness to unconventional dynamics. This placement does not automatically follow traditional relationship structures. It is more interested in what actually works between two people that can create very unique connections. But it can also create instability if there is no structure at all. So part of the growth here is understanding that freedom and structure are not opposites. A relationship can have both. It can allow individuality while still being stable. That balance is where this placement becomes strongest. Now, another thing that stands out is how this placement handles emotional expression. It does not always lead with feeling. It often leads with awareness, understanding what is happening, observing how things are shifting, noticing what is changing over time. The emotion is there, but it may not be the first thing that is shown. And if the other person is expecting immediate emotional response, this can create misunderstanding, because from the outside, it may look like distance, when in reality it is processing. That is why communication matters here. Not constant communication, clear communication, enough that both people understand what is real without needing to assume. Now, one of the challenges for Venus in Aquarius is that it can become too self-contained. It can understand everything internally while sharing very little externally. And over time, that creates a gap, because connection needs exchange, not just internal clarity. So part of the development is learning to express enough for the other person to engage with. Not everything, but enough. There is also something unique about how this placement builds attachment. It does not always happen immediately. Interest can be quick. Connection can be quick. But attachment can take time. And when it does form, it may not look dramatic. It may look steady, consistent, quietly present, but it is real, and often more durable than it first appears. Finally, when Venus in Aquarius is working well, it creates a very specific kind of relationship. One that does not rely on control. One that does not depend on constant emotional proof. One that allows both people to remain themselves without weakening the bond. It creates space but not emptiness, closeness but not pressure, understanding but not overanalysis. And that is what makes it different. It does not try to fit connection into a fixed shape. It allows it to evolve.